Hi, everybody. I'm going to try and show you how I think about display and building CSS layouts. If you go to the documentation, which I'm on here, the Mozilla docs, it seems super overwhelming. There's like so many different properties and different ways you can do things. I'm going to show you that really there's only three things that you generally need to know if you're trying to lay out something on a website or a web app. So what I've got here to start is just like a very, very simple Bootstrap like template. If you've never used Bootstrap before, you just look up how to install it. You copy these two tags in, then you basically just put a div with class container, and then you can put everything in there and use these nice little CSS classes instead of having to write everything in a CSS file by hand. It's just much faster, and I'm lazy, so that's how I do things. So let's talk through the three things you need to know to build a layout. The first property, the first way you can lay stuff out is block. And this one's very easy because that's pretty much by default how everything is going to be laid out for you. So you put in, your header, you put in a paragraph tag, and you'll see these are all very, very simple, button, whatever. All this is just going to go down the page like a block, okay? And I've put in these table and accordion. I've just pulled those in as sample elements from Bootstrap, just copy pasted. And so, yeah, basically everything by default is going to be a block element. So like, okay, let's say we want to put something else after this accordion. It is going to be just a block. It's going to keep going down the page. Very simple. There's kind of some nuance with inline block. So for example, buttons are by default inline block elements. So instead of going down the page, these are going to go next to each other, which is kind of something you need to know, but not really. There's some cases where, okay, yeah, the buttons are going to go next to each other, whatever. Who cares? When you're laying out, a bigger website, web app, you're not really going to use inline block as a way of laying out the whole system. That's just going to be a very, very small piece of it. Okay. So number one, block. By default, you're going to use this. Okay. I want you to look at an example for number two. So we just learned about block. Now we're going to learn about grid. You'll see here, this Microsoft website is probably something you've seen everywhere. Everyone likes these little card things. And what you'll see is really cool about this is that as we shrink them, there's always three columns and it's always taking up the same ratio. So the stuff inside is shrinking, but the size of these little card things is adjusting to the screen size. So this is using CSS grid. And we're going to show you exactly how to do that with Bootstrap. This is kind of a pain to do if you're using raw CSS, but with Bootstrap, these CSS classes, it's not going to be very hard. So we're basically just going to say, okay, I want this thing to be a row, and then I'm going to have three columns. Okay. Very, very, very simple. So then let's say, okay, let's go back. And now we've got three columns, and these are going to stay the same size no matter how big or small the screen gets, which is super cool and super useful. Hopefully you can start thinking of ways you can use this in your own websites, web apps. So I want to show you two other things with this grid. Not all of your columns have to be the same size, which is helpful. So let's say we had two columns. Let's say I wanted this first one to be twice as big as this other one. With Bootstrap, this is very easy. You can say, okay, this one should be 8, this one should be 4. You have to make the numbers basically add up to 12. I don't really know why, but that's how it works. And then you go back and you'll see, okay, thing 1 is twice as big as thing 2. And as we shrink it, that ratio is going to stay constant, which is super, super cool. So like say, okay, I wanted this thing two as like a little side menu that doesn't need to be as big as this thing one. You could do that very easily, right? And I want to show you one additional piece on top of this. You'll see here, as we change this ratio, thing two is going to get really squished as we get to a smaller screen. This is a very, very common thing. I think about 2/3 of internet traffic is on mobile devices now. And that obviously depends on what you are building, but that's very important. So what we can do, and Bootstrap makes this very easy, we can change how these columns are going to appear at different screen sizes. So here we can say at the Bootstrap small breakpoint, we want these to stack so that it looks fine on a cell phone, right? Let's shrink it and we'll see at the small screen, which is right about here, the things are going to stack. So that is super, super helpful if you want to make things usable on a phone. So that is grid. So that doesn't seem too complicated, right? We got block when you want things, basically very simple top to bottom. Number two, we got grid when you want something a little more complicated. But where does this break down? Because grid is helpful, but there's a lot of other cases that aren't covered in this. And basically how I want you to think about this is, let's say that instead of a fixed ratio, instead of, hey, I always want this thing to be twice as big as this thing, what if instead we had thing two and we had this as a fixed width? Let's say we had a little card thing. Let's say we wanted this to always be this size, right? Something like that. So let's say we take off our grid. We always want thing two to be this size, okay? And what if we wanted basically what a grid could do, but instead of keeping the same ratio, what if I wanted thing two to always be the same size and everything else to adjust to it? This is actually a very, very, very common use case. So thing two, what if I want a lot of space for thing one and a fixed amount of space for thing two? So like, I don't know, maybe we got a little navigation menu, and we know exactly how much space that takes up. And then thing one, we can just give it as much space. So this is how we're going to do it. We are going to use what's called flexbox. And to do this, the syntax in Bootstrap is pretty simple. We can use display flex. And then we'll see what's going to happen. We can give thing one this really cool property of flex grow. So basically, we have a flex container. This thing is a fixed width, and thing one is just going to take up as much space as it can in that container. So let's see. Okay, so this actually looks very, very similar to the grid we had before, but watch what's different. As we shrink it, thing two is going to stay the same size, and thing one is going to shrink. So this ratio is changing, which seems like a small difference, but it's actually pretty important. Okay, so what else can we do with this? So look at the nav bar up here. This is like a cool little effect. It's like, okay, I want this stuff on the right. We want this stuff on the left. We can do that too. So like, instead of doing flex grow, let's take that off. And we'll see here, okay, so thing one is just going to shrink down. We have our fixed width thing two over here. What if it's like, okay, in this container, I want thing two to be always on the right. So that's when we can use two properties called justify and align. So justify is going to control our horizontal movement here. So these things are going to basically always stay stuck to the edges, which is really cool. We can also use align to basically push things up and down in alignment there. So that's flex. And it's really, really hard to even scratch the surface of everything that flex can do. But I want to show you one other thing that's really, really neat. So we're going to grab these little card things from Bootstrap. Again, it's just a little component we're going to copy and paste a bunch of times. Let's say we just want a bunch of these, right? Okay, so the computer doesn't really know what to do about this. So it's like supposed to be 18 REMs wide. So if we take this off, it's a little misleading. But okay, so this is how wide these should be, right? So let's say we have a ton of these things and we just want to put them everywhere. We just want to fill as much space as we can. That's where we can use this really, really cool property called flex wrap. This is going to say, take up as much horizontal space as you can, and then just go to the next line when you run out. So we're going to see what this looks like. So we'll see, it's sort of like a grid, but it's really, really responsive. So, okay, it's running out of space on the right side. It's going to drop to the next line, drop to the next line, just like that. And then things are going to be laid out really, really nicely. You can take up plenty of space. And another cool little trick, you can use gap, which will give you space between your things to make it look a little bit cleaner. So there you have it. So to quickly recap, number one, if you don't have anything specific, complicated you're needing to do on your website, web app, you are going to use block. Number two, if you have a fixed ratio, so think like these little cards. Okay, I always want these things to be, 3 columns or whatever. Or maybe I want one column that's really big and one column that's small, and I want that same ratio. You are going to use a grid. Number three, pretty much anything else that's like a more complicated layout, you are going to want to use flex. And keep in mind, you can combine these, and you often will. So you could have a flex box with a grid inside it, or a flex box with block level elements inside it, which sounds complicated, but really what you have to do is start at the most basic level. So you're like, okay, I have a dashboard and I want to make a box over here and a box over here. We're going to put stuff in those. Don't try and put anything in those boxes to start. Just basically draw your outlines and play around with how it's going to work. And I promise you, you can create something that seems a lot more complicated than it really is once you get down to it. I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching.